Today's guest and I go back a long time. Today's conversation is with Niraj Naik. He's the founder of Soma Breath, a breathwork system based on traditional yogic practices like pranayama that he combined with his world-class rhythmic soundtracks. And in our conversation today, we deep dive into what's possible using the breath. We deep dive into the science behind altered states of consciousness and the tremendous effects of breath on our nervous system and overall health. Enjoy this conversation today with Niraj Naik. So I'd love to dive in a little bit into this is kind of what I have in mind, into not so much into your story. Of course, we can throw that in, but into Soma, kind of what your routines is with Soma, how you teach it, what you recommend with that. And also, if you what's exciting, something like it's just having a conversation. Like the podcast in general is more on the spiritual, entrepreneur, science, philosophy, these angles, and whatever brings the conversation up, we're gonna chat about. That's kind of the intention. Yeah,
sounds cool.
Sounds good. Man. Awesome. So, tell me, why breathing? Why breathing for you? Why that focus, actually?
Well, if you think about it, we live without food for a few weeks. We live without water for a few days, right? But breathing, we can only live without for a few minutes, okay? But for some reason, it's the least regarded thing out of those three things, right? We usually focus on diet when we want to make a change. Drinking lots of water. Everyone's going on about drinking lots of water. That's also kind of a myth. But breathing has only in the last few years become something relevant, right, to health. Before that, it wasn't really talked about much in the mainstream. There was definitely some amazing scientists like Buteyko back in the day who did a lot of science, did a lot of studies and showed the link between bad breathing habits and diseases and, basically low body tissue oxygenation being the root cause of most diseases and how to solve that problem and what causes that problem. So he did a lot of science on that, but he ultimately got it all from yoga and pranayama because he was trying to fix his high blood pressure, and he turned to yoga. He discovered the original kind of yoga sutras and started to dig deep into it. And through changing his breathing according to the yogic tradition, he fixed his high blood pressure, but then was also able to then go on and develop the Buteyko method. And he is a medical doctor, so he helped a lot of patients with breathing issues and saw a link between bad breathing habits like hyperventilation, mouth breathing, over breathing, breathing harder than you need to, deep breathing, heavy breathing, right? He saw a strong link between that and chronic diseases and showed that actually the more you breathe, the heavier you breathe, the more you need to breathe, means the less efficient you are at getting oxygen to where it really needs to go in the body, which is the body tissue cells, right? So it's getting it off the red blood cells and into the body tissue cells. The red blood cells, all that, the purpose of them is transportation, right? So he showed this link, and it all revolved around carbon dioxide being the kind of crux of the problem and the solution. So CO2 is something we've also been told it's a waste gas and it's toxic and all this. But actually CO2, if you look at it, is the prana in pranayama, right? Without the CO2 being the right concentration in your bloodstream, you won't get oxygen coming off the blood cells. So our body has a very intelligent system that tells you your blood where to drop off oxygen. Okay, so you breathe in oxygen, oxygen binds to your red blood cells, then it needs to get from the blood cells to the body tissue cells. So the CO2 levels is what determines where your body drops off, your blood drops off the oxygen, right?
So can it be dropped off before where the ideal drop off is at the mitochondria, right? At the cell, like
it's going to be dropped off where the cells are most in demand of oxygen. Otherwise, we'd be very inefficient at using oxygen and breathing, because if you're constantly breathing in and the oxygen's going to every cell in your body, it's not an efficient process, right? And also oxygen has issues with it. It causes oxidative stress, right? So it's the CO2 levels, right? Because imagine every cell is breathing all the time. When CO2 levels are higher, like say you're doing dumbbell workouts, which I know you like to do, right? Exercise. So you're doing all these exercises. Your body knows, your blood knows where to drop off. I'm going to show you something with this in a minute, but it's still your body knows where to drop off the oxygen. It's going to send it more to the muscles that are being used the most. So they're the ones breathing out the most CO2. So the muscles that send, or the cells that are breathing out the most CO2 is where the oxygen will go. It's called the Bohr effect. It's the process that gases exchange.
So basically, to sum it up, like where the cell has, every cell is always constantly breathing, so to speak. And when they're breathing, they're emitting CO2. And where the CO2 concentration is the highest, this is where the oxygen can be transformed or can be
has
get
to reach a certain threshold. Yeah.
Threshold.
So then your blood will only drop off oxygen to those areas. All right. Now, the problem is if you breathe heavily, if you breathe much harder than you need to, overbreathe, like breathing through your mouth is one of the prime culprits for this. And also talking a lot. When you talk a lot, you let go of a lot of CO2. That CO2 is a signal, right, in the body. So if you let go of that CO2, the oxygen doesn't know, or the blood doesn't know where to drop off the oxygen. So it stays stuck to your red blood cells. This causes actually vasoconstriction, high blood pressure, and also then eventually injury to the walls of your arteries, which then leads to atherosclerosis, heart disease. So heart disease is caused a lot by bad breathing habits, over breathing, heavy breathing. Now, what causes
over time though?
Over time, chronic hyperventilation. Chronic mild hyperventilation is what leads to a lot of the diseases that we have. Now, what causes chronic mild hyperventilation? That's why breathing is so important, right? Understanding breathing. Chronic mild hyperventilation is caused by unconscious breathing, right? Where you're breathing unconsciously, where your reptilian brain, which controls breathing, right? It controls all of the autonomic nervous functions in the body, right? So your heart rate, your immune system, your body temperature, digestion is all controlled by the reptilian brain, which deals with everything that runs on autopilot so that you can have a conscious experience of the world. Now, the problem with the reptilian brain is that it's always looking out for what's safe and unsafe. Okay. Now, if you are born where your thermostat, like your sensitivity to what's safe and unsafe is kind of like turned to the max, where you see the world with fear all the time. This can happen with actually early traumas that happen in early childhood, right? Or actually when the baby's first born, birth traumas.
Even before born, yeah.
This can make a child, a baby, like right from the beginning, see the world as unsafe, right? And we all have different degrees of what we deem to be safe and unsafe. So we all have an underlying anxiety because the reptilian brain, all that deals with is your survival at all costs. Now, if it's tuned to this vision, worldview, belief system that the world is unsafe, can't trust anyone, can't trust anything, then this level of reptilian stress response can be much higher, right, than average people. But even just normal, everyday average people, because we live in such a high, like, stress world, right? So this, instead of like lions and tigers and bears being our source of stress, which it used to be in the olden days, those lions, tigers and bears, which would actually be a threat, but we had a mechanism of running away or fighting, defending ourselves. Nowadays, they're constantly with us. They are now your deadlines, your bills, your tax, your boss, your your job you don't want to do, your relationship that's not working, or if you're single and you're desperately looking for someone, that puts you on high alert all the time, right? So you're always looking out for what's safe, unsafe. And that means then you produce more adrenaline, more cortisol, right? And adrenaline and cortisol ramps up your need to breathe. It makes you breathe harder than you need to because it basically is trying to prepare you for going into battle, right? But if you have this source of stress, but you're actually not finding a way to turn that stress off, right? Then your breathing tends to be a form of chronic mild hyperventilation throughout the day. And then also what happens is, as a child, if you form bad breathing habits, one of the worst breathing habits is mouth breathing, chronic mouth breathing. And you'll see children, you can see them.
I used to do that a large part of my childhood because my nose was always clogged and I just was breathing from my mouth.
And one of the reasons what causes the nose to be blocked, okay, is a combination of lifestyle factors, which all affects chronic mild hyperventilation. So you got the fear response, that's one. The other one is if you eat a lot of processed foods and sugar. This also makes you send all your demand for digestion. All your blood flow goes to your digestive glands and it's less energy being used for other processes. So this again ramps up your demand for breathing. Your breathing gets heavier, especially if you overeat. And a lot of children these days, they gorge on food and snacks and sugar, overeat, get overloaded with food. This affects your diaphragm as well. And actually you'll see with pregnant ladies, their breathing gets very deep and heavy actually, because when you have a lot of substance, okay, in the belly, this affects the diaphragm and the diaphragm's ability to breathe properly. So this is happening with children who are becoming obese at a young age. And when you're eating a lot, consuming a lot, overeating, I mean, try it as a practice now. If you overeat, if you eat loads of food, gorge it down, watch what happens to your breathing. You'll see it affects, and then processed foods and all of these things really affects your breathing. So you end up chronically hyperventilating throughout the day. Okay. So diet and then lack of sleep or the wrong type of sleep, oversleep. Sleeping also is quite detrimental to your breathing if you breathe through your mouth during sleep. Okay. So that's another cause of chronic mild hyperventilation. So there's a lot of things, prescription meds, bad exercise, exercising too hard, too intensely, where you end up mouth breathing during exercise, all of these things, or not doing enough of the right exercise, becoming unfit, leads to unhealthy breathing habits, poor oxygen efficiency. So if you look at the entire system of pranayama and yoga, it's a system actually of correcting your breathing and becoming super efficient using oxygen. So actually what happens, your breathing rate, your natural breathing rate slows right down and your demand for oxygen, needing to breathe, slows right down. Because as we said, oxygen, this was studied by Helmut Sees, the father of redox chemistry, says that although it's very difficult to live without oxygen, it's also very difficult to live with oxygen. Because if you got to imagine the mitochondria is like a combustion engine. And we have like 1,000 mitochondria, right? On average inside every cell. And they're all burning oxygen and that produces a fire, just like normal combustion engine, right? Over time, if you put the wrong fuel into it, or if you drive it too hard, or it's an inefficient engine, it's going to wear and tear, it's going to break down, right? Same thing. So when we optimize our breathing and we do the right type of exercise and we change our lifestyle, we make our mitochondria super efficient. In fact, we can increase the number of mitochondria we have from 1,000 to 4,000 with certain breathing techniques. And what that does is it means our need to breathe inhale oxygen reduces massively. Okay. So our system of Soma Breath, what I've done is I've taken the wisdom of Buteyko method, the practices of yoga, pranayama, inspiration from Wim Hof as well. He's a friend of mine, to develop a system which I've made very fun and accessible through music, technology that works with me very well because I managed to cure myself of an autoimmune disease When I was chronically hyperventilating, breathing badly, stressed out, had a nervous breakdown, boom, got sick, and then I had to fix myself. That's where I discovered breathing and the power of it for the first time. That's what took me on this journey. But I've developed this system, Soma Breath, that it's like a pharmacy of different breathing techniques, because all of these techniques in pranayama, what they have is really like a pharmacy, but they all end up, the net result of doing them all in the right way is to make your breathing very efficient. Okay. So you need to breathe less. Your breathing rate slows down. You become more calm and your CO2 tolerance goes up. All right. So going back to CO2, it's the CO2 tolerance that determines how heavy and hard we breathe, because CO2 is what signals your brain you need to inhale. It's the CO2, not oxygen levels or the lack of oxygen, CO2 levels. So if you have bad breathing habits and you're from a childhood been very stressed or having the wrong lifestyle, your CO2 tolerance reduces, and it means you need to inhale much faster than you actually need to. So you end up breathing at a fast rate. Okay. So when you actually do these breathing techniques, you actually raise your CO2 tolerance and then your breathing rate slows down. And if you have more CO2 capacity in your body, more capacity to hold and retain CO2, the more energy you produce efficiently, because then your oxygen can leave and go into the cells naturally, and you get better body tissue oxygenation, which is the secret of longevity.
So where do you start usually when you're like with your system? Like when someone comes in, let's say they have chronic diseases, they eat the wrong food, they're overbreathing chronically, they're basically not that healthy, and they do all the things which are not right. So it's kind of a vicious circle, no? I think everything contributes to each other. So as you did explain it, and breathing, you come in with breathing and that interrupts that circle, or you come in with give them nutrition advice as well, or what's the first step you go in?
Right. So we've created courses that are like frameworks for coaching. So we train instructors actually on how to deliver these coaching frameworks. And the first step is our Breath Fit course. And the Breath Fit course is based on traditional pranayama techniques, right? But remember, I'm a music producer, so I make everything musical and fun. So that's the framework. And it's all about learning the basics of retraining your breath, slowing the breath down, and little daily mindful breathing exercises you can do to always ensure you're breathing correctly through the nose into the diaphragm, right? And really retraining the breath to become more efficient. So that's the foundation. Okay. And in there, we use the Ayurvedic system of customizing lifestyle for the individual. Because in Ayurveda, we're all individual, unique. There's no one size fits all. So we have these three energy types, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. You know, there's a different approach for each one. We train our instructors on how to also deliver customized. So when it comes to diet, exercise, even sleep, and even career choice and environment, climate, we take all this into account because the Ayurvedic system is extremely smart for this. So that's the first step. Then the next step after that is really going deep, which is our 21-day awakening course, which is all about really creating a vision for what it is you want in your life, going after it, clearing emotional clutter, negative beliefs that hold you back. And we have special breathing techniques for that as well. And then we have even deeper courses. But our real first step is the Breath Fit training,
which is more or less customized then with the whole Ayurvedic approach then, as you said. Got it. And how do you, I recently talked to a friend and I told him about breathing and I told him, hey, look, this is the way kind of how you should breathe. And as he's getting more and more into meditation, he's very, very open and curious about this. But he had the biggest challenges with the breathing, actually. He had the biggest challenge to retrain his breathing. So how long does it usually take? If you're, let's say if you're 30 or 40 years old, your whole life you were breathing, or majority of your life, maybe when you were born, you were breathing correctly, but then you kind of fucked it up in a way. How long does it usually take for someone to retrain the breathing to get on the right path?
Days. You can transform someone's health within 4 or 5 days. Like somebody with asthma, right? And if they have asthma, just doing the retraining techniques, they can actually relieve asthma and say goodbye to asthma within a few days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very quick. Very quick. Because the fastest effect on our physiology, right, aside from drugs, okay, is your breath.
It's so curious, like, because you mentioned at the beginning that, like, we focus so much on exercise, on diet, but now we got aware in the Western world, and I put more attention on breathing. Why do you think is this so? Like, why first exercise, then nutrition, and now it's breath? Why? It's something actually that's so obvious because we're breathing all the time, as you put it. Why do you think this is the latest?
Well, what's interesting is that if you look at the training of medical doctors, pharmacists, okay, which is our so-called health experts, they have very, very little training on what I just explained on breathing, right? Even though all the science and evidence is out there and we know all of this, the Bohr effect is a very recognized thing. They have as much training on breathing as they do on diet. So the two most important lifestyle factors for your health, they have the least training on, right? Why is that? Now, why is that? Is there a reason why they don't want the so-called pillars of society or the pill poppers of society? They don't want them to, pill pushers of society. They don't want them to know the most important things, which would mean if you change those two things, you don't need the medications. Why is it that I'm just putting out there? There's a reason why they know it all. This is like, we know breathing is very important, but it's taking out of the medical system for some reason. But now it's switching big time. They can't ignore it now.
And it's one of the biggest bang for the buck, I'd say, breathing.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like most people who become doctors, medical professionals, pharmacists, they go into it with the best intentions. They want to help. Same as me. They want to help. They want to serve. They want to help people improve their lives, but they're limited by the knowledge that they get from school. And they are also limited by what they're allowed, to give out, to prescribe, because of the framework that they are set down. And what's happening because of this, because there's so much awareness right now with the science and, all the new things that are emerging, they're so limited, right? And they know this, that actually there are more doctors leaving the profession than joining. There's more pharmacists leaving than joining, right? There's actually a decline in the number of healthcare professionals out there because they're waking up. They're realizing there are other ways. And then the healthcare professionals that are staying with it are now expanding. Like in our training, we're seeing pharmacists coming in, doctors, dentists, for our, many of them, because they're like, wow, we need to know this stuff. This is the basic fundamentals. We should know this. So there is an awakening going on. There's a huge shift happening, especially with COVID. That's changed the game. But there's a saying that goes, every child is born a genius, only to be turned into an idiot when they go to school. And that's what happened to me. I'm sorry. One of the good things I learned from school was discipline of studying and basic reading and writing. But most of the content that I learned in pharmacy is complete nonsense. Don't need it, right? Or you need a little bit of it, but most of it's pointless stuff. It doesn't really make us healthy, happy, right? So I'm so fortunate I got that discipline. And, a lot of doctors and dentists, pharmacists, they have incredible capacity to learn and to retain knowledge and impart that knowledge. So what's cool is to be able to transfer that skill now to what really makes a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely observe this shift as well. People are looking out more and more for stuff you guys are doing, and I think it's super important to put more attention on that. But yeah, this is another thing. you were mentioning, let's say there's people who are really really good with the system, with like the education system, and can retain, like you said, pharmacists, doctors who can retain a lot of information. And there's people who are not so good in this, and then they usually become more entrepreneurial, find out more their own thing. But I also observe a lot of these, let's say, holistic health practitioners in general, who didn't have this rigor background, that they lack exactly these skills which are somehow needed as well, which are consistency, like following through with things. And I think it's super important to learn both sides of it. Like maybe not everything you learn from school, but the learning of the consistency, the learning of like the methods, how to apply it. What I learned a lot from, I studied physics myself. Biggest thing I learned is problem solving. It doesn't have to do with physics, but that's what we're doing all the time. And if I don't know how to solve it myself, I figure it out somehow. I find a person, I find it online, whatsoever. So I think these methods are very, very crucial still. So that's, I think, well, I'm saying this, I think it's very important that people who are having an academic background, who go now and apply their methods of learnings, their background of their problem solving skills towards this industry, I think, as well.
But what's amazing still in the medical world, right, is like COVID is a great example, is how many doctors, right, that I've spoken to and listened to still just believe exactly what they're told from the pharmaceutical industry. They don't do any of the actual research that you should to discern what is correct and what isn't. And there's an amazing guy actually I listened to on a Joe Rogan podcast. He's a ex-pharmacy rep, and he explained how basically the pharmaceutical companies pay reps, and quite often they're like these glamorous, beautiful women who go and just wine and dine doctors and basically give them their version of the study. And the doctors don't do any other research other than just taking that face value, right? Now, that's one of the big problems we have in the world, is doctors who are fed up or not willing to actually learn anymore and research themselves. And this is one of the reasons why in the last 3 years, so much harm has been caused, because things have got onto the market that shouldn't have been on the market. And things have been like censored that should have not been censored, right? So that's another reason why so many doctors are leaving the profession, because they can't speak out when they believe something to be wrong, right? So actually, I think we really need to find doctors and healthcare professionals who are doing their own research. And it's actually not as common as you think. Because
they learn basically to follow what they were told.
That's right.
This is also systemic.
And money. And there's so much money and incentives, and there's so many doctors getting kickbacks. And all of this leads to a lot of harm, public health, and people being brainwashed into complete nonsense,
It's very systemic, yeah. I would like to dive though a little bit more into the science. You had an interesting device on your finger. I think it's blood oxygen meter.
Yeah, it does, and it also measures your heart rate. So, but just on that, what I was talking about is a guy called Brigham Bueller. I think he's an amazing dude. Check him out. He really has a great insight into how Big Pharma works, as he was a top pharma rep.
Do you know Zach Bush?
Yeah, he's interesting.
He's very interesting as well.
There are a lot of awake doctors now who are coming into the forefront, but the problem is a lot of them fear losing their jobs and licenses. And I think one of the countries recently, I think it might have been America, have signed into law, if you go against this CDC, what they would say, you will be instantly taken off the register. It's just been signed into law, which is just insane. because the CDC have been so wrong. Like in the last 3 years, what's happened? So wrong, unbelievably wrong.
Wow. Okay. So what is this guy called?
Brigham Bueller. Check him out. He goes really deep into it. It's one of the Joe Rogan recent podcasts. Check it out.
I'll check it out. Yeah.
So this thing.
Yeah. So tell me, what is this?
So this thing measures, the reason I like to bring this gadget out is because it's my little game. This thing measures your heart rate. Okay, I'm trying to, maybe I'll put it on this finger, it'll be better. Anyway, you can see the numbers, right? So on the left is 63, 60. That's my heart rate. Okay. So we've been told another big myth, right, is that we have no control over the autonomic nervous system consciously, that it's all unconscious and it's without our ability to have conscious control, which I will show you right now is not true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise my heart rate up by around 20, 30 beats per minute. And then I'm going to lower it. Okay. Straight away and try and get it as low as I can. Okay. You ready?
Go for it. Wow. Wow. You got really good at this.
There you go. How's that?
From 42 to 100, 110, 107 or something. Wow. I'm back. Crazy. Wow, that's impressive. I remember you showed me that a few times, but this is next level. You get really good at this. The interesting thing there is, like, I mean, we can raise our heartbeats. This is what's probably everybody knows when we do sport or when we go running or sprinting or so, but you just sit there and you do it.
And we were told that that's impossible. So the way you do it is very simple. So in yoga, we have these bandhas, energy locks, right? You've probably heard of Mula Bandha, but actually the one that's really connected to the autonomic nervous system is the Ashwini Mudra. Ashwini Mudra is the muscles around your sphincter. And when you contract them up and draw up and hold your breath on the inhale, we activate adrenaline. We produce adrenaline. Okay. And that's what raises the heart rate up. Okay. Now, the opposite, to lower the heart rate. Okay. You breathe out very slowly. Like you're breathing out through a small straw.
With your mouth or nose?
Doesn't matter, nose or mouth. Just slowly. And then you hold your breath at the end. When you hold your breath at the end, it actually the exhale lowers heart rate, inhale increases heart rate. When you hold your breath after exhale, you bring your heart rate down gradually. That's why I was getting it so low. All right. So if you can hold your breath for long periods of time, you can actually bring your heart rate down like below 40 beats per minute. Right. But basically why that's useful is that we can, on command, produce adrenaline and also another hormone called DHEA, which is a dilator. And adrenaline is like it's like an activator, right? It's an activating neurotransmitter. And you can create a positive stress response rather than a negative stress. When you have a negative stress response, you produce cortisol and this constricts and it causes you to go into paralysis, freeze, right? And it's a way of like hiding, defending, okay? But when you create a positive stress response, you go into courage and expansion, and this leads to strength, right? So you can create a sequence of breathing techniques that leads to positive stress response, which is what I just did there, okay? You can also do breathing techniques to lower your heart rate and switch off stress and to calm the nervous system down, which is what I did there.
So how fast can you technically switch off stress? If let's say there is some I think, let's say, think of a day-to-day stressful situation that kind of kicks you. That is happening. Let's say you're walking on through the city, and there was a car, very close call, like something like this. Probably all of us experienced at one point. Then after that, you feel like full of adrenaline. You feel like, wow, I just survived this. So, how fast you can drop this?
Yeah, cool. Well, also it could be like somebody says something to you, it triggers you, right? So it can also be emotional stress. Okay. So the quickest way to turn off the stress quickly, to stop that stress harming you, causing harm to the body, right, is breathe in slightly through your nose and breathe out slowly. And when you get to the end, very slight inhale. And just keep doing that, and you'll start to feel really calm, like after a few minutes. And going back to this device, okay, what this shows you is SpO2 level. Now, I want to show you, look, that's 97 at the moment. Okay, if you read it properly, it's 97. There's an abundance of oxygen. Just a slight inhale, and it will be fully saturated. Yeah. So we have an abundance of oxygen. There's loads of oxygen in the atmosphere, right? But the trick is to get the oxygen from your blood cells, because what happens is when you breathe in, the oxygen comes into your system, binds to your red blood cells, okay? And there it's transported around the body. But so what this measures is your oxygen saturation, okay? But of your blood cells. Now, if you don't have enough CO2, you're going to get full saturation of your blood cells, right? But not of your body tissue cells. And what we want to get is the oxygen coming off your red blood cells and going into the body tissue cells. So you have optimum body tissue oxygenation. Okay. And that's where CO2 comes in. So it's not that we have an oxygen problem. We have abundance of oxygen. There's loads of oxygen. In fact, there's so much we don't need all of it. We have a CO2 problem.
So how do you increase and measure the oxygen saturation in your blood cell, and not in your blood cell, in the tissue cells? Like this is just measuring in the blood cells. So how?
You need a proper medical device to do that, because it's going to be different all over your body. This just measures your blood oxygen saturation, all right, which is...
But can you say if that drops, is that an indicator? If that drops, is that an indicator that the tissue oxygenation increases?
It can be. So in certain medical conditions, when your SpO2 drops and it stays chronically below a certain amount, it means you're not getting enough oxygen to your red blood cells. If it's a chronic thing where it's going on for hours, right? And so some respiratory issues, COPD, things like that, even lung cancer, what it does is it means you're getting less oxygen from your lungs going into the red blood cells. And if that gaseous exchange is affected, it can cause lots of health issues, because then you have a problem of oxygen. But majority of people, we don't have that issue. What we have is a CO2 issue. We are over breathing, hyperventilating, breathing too much through our mouth, and stressful breathing when we're stressed, or exercising too intensely where we're breathing in and out through our mouth for long periods. That is what leads to low CO2 in the body and poor CO2 tolerance, which then leads to low body tissue oxygenation.
Yes. And what is if that is like only short term, like for example, breath work, using like Wim Hof methods or so?
Yeah, or holotropic, rebirthing, things like that. So here what we're doing is we're creating, so there's different techniques. So let's look at like Wim Hof method, for example, okay, which is fast breathing, okay, follow it for about 20, 30 reps, followed by holding your breath after exhalation, right? Now, what the goal of the fast breathing is, or in his case, he's doing it through the mouth. The point of that, okay, that breathing technique, when you're breathing in through your mouth and letting go, right, over and over, it actually generates heat in the body. Fast breathing through your mouth, or hyperventilating through the mouth, creates heat in the body. So it's a good thing for cold climates, okay? But also what it does is it lets go of the CO2, right? The CO2 from the system. And what the CO2 does, as I said, was it tells you need to inhale. So if you can let go of CO2, the signal for inhalation, for a short period, it means your need to inhale is less. So you can then hold your breath after exhale for a long period of time. Okay. So what that means, and I'll show you on here. We'll do a demonstration if you want. Right. Is, so look at that number. I'm going to do like what we call the Wim Hof method. All right. I'm going to do it and you're going to watch what happens. So remember, most people on average can only hold their breath for 20 to 40 seconds. But if you hyperventilate first, your ability to hold your breath increases. Okay. So watch this. I'm going to do it Wim Hof style. There you go. That's a quick demo.
It dropped from 98 to 79.
And look at my heart rate. So I went down below 40.
It's 41, no? Yeah. Wow.
So I don't know how long I held it there, but I can hold it usually much longer if I'm not doing this demo like this. But you'll see, if you watch the video back, around a minute to a minute 30 is when the SpO2 level starts to drop. And what we do is we create a state called intermittent hypoxia. Intermittent hypoxia creates a lower than normal oxygen level, right? Because you're not breathing, you're stopping new oxygen coming in, right? You're stopping CO2 from going out because you've stopped breathing. So what's happening is you're creating a pause for a moment where you create this state called intermittent hypoxia, right? Which is a brief period of lower than normal oxygen, below 90%. And this makes an adaptive change in your body. Your body freaks out and it thinks you're running out of oxygen. So it goes, okay, I need to prepare for this. So what it does is it actually ramps up your ability to use oxygen to make it more efficient. So actually what happens is you increase red blood cells. You actually increase vascularization, capillaries in your heart, in your brain. You also dilate blood vessels, and this is all triggered by an ingredient called nitric oxide gas, right, that really makes all this activate. And overall, a strengthening happens, right? Because when you create a positive stress, where you take something away from the body for a brief period, or you apply a pressure on the body, like a sauna, fasting, something like that, it makes your body grow back stronger as a response to that stress. So it's a brief period of controlled intermittent hypoxia that we're creating. Now, there's different ways of doing this. That the Wim's got his way with Wim Hof method, and it's really good for generating heat in the body, especially with the cold immersion techniques that he does, which is incredible. Okay. Now, in pranayama tradition, the way I do it is with rhythmic breathing, slow rhythmic breathing first. Is actually how freedivers do the same technique. And this actually allows you to go even deeper into breath retentions, to maximize your breath hold phase for as much as possible. And what that does, when you get to around 2 to 3 minutes of breath hold after exhale, that's where real magic starts happening. You start to wake up stem cells out of circulation, And the stem cells have the ability to turn into any other cell in the body, right? You wake up very small embryonic stem cells and they start going to areas of the body where there's inflammation, where growth needs to happen, regeneration needs to happen. Okay. So you're waking up your own ability to heal, self-heal, which is incredible. So that's one core technique in pranayama. And it actually will also lead to better oxygen efficiency, better CO2 tolerance, and all of these things.
So pranayama does it through rhythmic breathing, like you do it in Soma, correct?
Yeah, there's different ways. There's like Bastrika, which is faster breathing, followed by breath holds. Or the way I do it is more like free diving, which is slow rhythmic breathing. And that slow rhythmic breathing also has an effect of creating a state of coherence and inner harmony. Because rhythmic breathing is what your body loves, breathing in a rhythm. It loves that. And every single function in your body is rhythmic, but we have biorhythms, and every biorhythm is subservient to the rhythm of your breath. That's why in yoga, yogic breathing is very rhythmic. Rhythmic breathing is the foundation of healthy breathing in yoga.
And do this rhythmic breathing because you breathe less in, I guess, you generate this intermittent hypoxia states, or you just generally lower the oxygenation as well?
Well, yeah, what we're doing is getting rid of large amounts of CO2 for a short period. And what we add in is the music element. Actually, if you go to the Wim Hof app, all the music on there I produce with his son, Enam. So we go more into psychedelic and altered states of consciousness, and also the pharmacy of breathing practices in pranayama. So there's many different techniques. And as I said, rhythmic breathing is magic, right? So we bring in the music, because music, firstly, it makes doing these practices more fun, right? But also when you breathe to the beat, okay, it creates this harmony, this harmonic breathing, which is the foundation of Soma breath, is rhythmic harmonic breathing to a beat. And when you breathe, so we have rhythms where you're breathing out twice the length of time as you breathe in. It's a double exhale time. This has the ability to switch on parasympathetic very fast. And that has a way of getting you into bliss states, altered states as well. And then also we have faster rhythmic breathing tracks, which is like in for 2 beats, out for 2, or in for 1, out for 1, using tones. That has another effect. This is what Cambridge University is studying right now, is our rhythmic breathing breath protocols and how it affects consciousness.
Wow, you're working with them right now?
Right now, Cambridge University is studying us, which is incredible. We're the one they picked for their amazing groundbreaking studies they're doing on the breath and relationship with the mind and consciousness. So actually, the results they're showing right now is that our technique is already on par with like things like psilocybin and MDMA therapy, ketamine therapy, which is phenomenal, right?
Wow. I mean, your beats as well, they're amazing. For everybody who doesn't know them, this guy is a genius in that sense as well. They're amazing for that. Where can actually, like, if someone is now interested, like, where should they check you out first? What's the first landing point? Someone who's new to that.
Yeah. Go check out somabreath.com. I'll give you the links so you can direct people to it in your show notes. But yeah, we have a website, somabreath.com. We have loads of free content on YouTube. And we have also Facebook group. There's a very active community, so you can join that as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. What I wanted to dive in a little bit more is you mentioned psychedelic states through breath. And I've experienced that. I mean, I think this is the first, like meeting you, literally you showed me that the first time really going deep into these psychedelic states, just using your breath. And I was so impressed. How's it called? Stan Grove with the holotropic breathwork is also focused mostly on that. So how do you explain that through the breath we can reach these states, and what are they actually, in your interpretation?
So your breath is intimately linked to your thoughts and consciousness states. So with rhythmic breathing, okay, what's happening, and this is all theory, we don't know for sure if this is exactly why, but as I said, fast rhythmic breathing, what it does is it's like a mild hyperventilation. It's a controlled hyperventilation. So actually what happens is you get less blood flow going eventually to your brain. Okay. And the way psychedelics work is that, like psilocybin, DMT, they suppress oxygenation of certain areas of the brain, which cuts off the control of the conscious mind, the neocortex, to the unconscious world. And that leads to altered states, right? That's how psilocybin works. Okay. It's one of the theories. So we are mimicking that through the breath. We're, for a brief period, reducing oxygenation's key areas of the brain, which leads to this boom, awakening happening. So that's one of the theories. Now, also what rhythmic breathing can do when it's done, especially with the tones, is you're constantly activating the vagus nerve and affecting the parasympathetic nervous system. And this can also have a added effect. And when it's in a very harmonic way, where it's done to a beat with music, it leads quite predictably what we've seen to bliss states and spiritual awakening type states, connection and feeling like at one with everything, right? So that's what we do, is we focus on controlled rhythmic harmonic breathing with tones to a beat. This is what takes people into very, very deep altered states of consciousness. And also what this rhythmic breathing can do with, especially using those tones, is it can release unresolved emotional stress and trauma that's built up over the years. So people can feel very, very free, liberated from doing these sessions.
Wow. Okay. And how does it differ from, or differentiate itself from the holotropic breathwork?
It's very similar, but what I'm trying to do is stick to the traditional tantric yoga methods, which is all about rhythmic breathing, making tones and sounds and activating the bandhas with rhythm to create that activation of the nervous system and leading to positive, powerful, controlled stress responses that leads to all these powerful changes in the body.
Yes. I mean, what I love about this, and I've done it quite, I was fortunate that you guided me quite a bunch of times already, and I'm doing it myself, is because through the breath, like in comparison to taking a substance, taking a psychedelic, you're still feeling control because you can stop at any moment. With psychedelic, while you're going on a journey for 4 hours or so, and with that, you can technically stop. And if someone has a release, they can, who are not ready to have this trauma release or so, it's easier for them to open up to this, easier for them to process this as well. So that's a very, very powerful point I observed and I heard a lot of times already.
Yeah. So there's breath work on its own as a therapeutic tool. There's also psychedelics on their own as a therapy tool. But when you bring them together, you can have an even more enhanced, powerful experience. And this is what we're actually working on with some amazing people out there in the psychedelic therapy space, and and we're looking to create state of the art facilities for breathwork, transformation, psychedelic treatments, all done in the right way, and then also bringing them together in certain experiences.
Wow, this is exciting. Amazing. Wow. I wanted to dive in a little bit into your understanding, and I know this is all still like cutting edge science, or if there's even science, is like the understanding how that affects the pineal gland and the release maybe of DMT through breathing practices, or even like the locks. What do you know about this, and how do you explain this, or is there something about this?
Well, in yogic tradition, we talk about the third eye, and this is the pineal gland, right? And visionary abilities come from there. And sixth sense, supersensory-like abilities come from this third eye being activated. What we do know is that the breath does, with the right energy locks, affect hormones from being released. Like we know adrenaline for sure. We know also DHEA can be affected. We also know cortisol can be created on demand if you want. We also know the opposite. We can turn on other neurotransmitters that deal with relaxation. Acetylcholine, for example. Okay. So we know we can affect the hormonal system with the breath from science, but yoga talks more about activating other chakra points, which if you look at the chakra points are also a mirror of the hormonal system, the endocrine system. Even tones, humming, vibrations can affect production of chemicals in the body, like nitric oxide. If you hum here, the paranasal sinuses is where you produce nitric oxide. You produce a lot of it, and nitric oxide has all these amazing healing benefits in the body. But when you use energy lock techniques and contracting, bringing your attention there and holding your breath in certain ways, you activate the third eye. You create this visionary abilities, right? So this is the legends of tantric yoga. However, science hasn't caught up with that yet. There is some awareness about it, but there's theories, but there's no real 100% like for certain breath control affects DMT being produced in the plant. Like, we don't know that 100% for sure. More studies are going to need to be done. We do know that DMT is produced by red blood cells and also found in the lung. So, that's interesting. We're hacking red blood cells and their function and lung function with breath work. So maybe this can explain DMT-like phenomena. But we do know anecdotally, we've seen time and time again, people describe intense breathwork experiences like holotropic, rebirthing, and what we do with Soma Breath as feeling like ayahuasca or psilocybin, DMT. So we know from observation that something is happening in the body that has the same end result, or similar, not completely exactly the same, as doing DMT.
I mean, I experienced it 100%. That's some super powerful states. Probably not in that duration, I'd say. Like the length is probably not that long, but it's profound. Like from a psychedelic, from an altered state of conscious state, but also from a even the heart opening, the heart coherence you reach, the love, probably comes close to MDMA. And all these effects. This is super interesting. And how do you, like, are you working as well with, or do you have any courses, any training programs specifically, or is all of that specifically geared towards that? Or you have any courses specifically geared towards spiritual enlightenment practices, consciousness expanding practices, or people are interested mostly in that?
Enlightenment is a big term, right? What is enlightenment? There's many different ideas about it.
How do you define it?
Enlightenment is, in my definition, is the waking up from the trance that we've been all conditioned and born into, to the realization that we have been programmed and we have been robotized by culture, environment, society, media, advertising. However, we have the ability to wake up out of this and change. That's, to me, is enlightenment, is the realization that we can wake up out of this trance and become our own software programmers of our own operating system, which is the mind.
Mm-hmm. And being there constantly.
If you can. Is also realizing that you also can't be there constantly. That it's going to be a thing this is the law of nature, is that we're always robotized. So what it isn't, even waking up, the process of waking up and having this ability could be a part of that robotization. So it's really understanding like truth. What is truth? True will. And the difference between true will and conditioned will.
But do you have any techniques or any special programs? Or are you working specifically with these people? The
courses I've created that are really helping go into spiritual states of consciousness is like our 21-day awakening journey, right? Which is really powerful. That's what Cambridge are studying. But then there's also the course I made with Shift Network recently, which is, I call it the codes of consciousness. And it's all about really understanding consciousness with powerful breathwork techniques that work on how we've been conditioned and to undo yourself using the breath.
I see, to rewire and to become more aware.
You can go down any reality tunnel you choose. You know, I was living the pharmaceutical reality tunnel at one point, and I bent reality by changing the reality I choose to tune into.
Yeah, so basically you're rewiring your brain in a way, or your attention and your reality in a way, by rewiring what you're putting your attention on through these states of like higher consciousness. I mean, in a similar way, I think psychedelics do it. No, they increase neuroplasticity, which probably breathwork does the same thing.
Yeah. So actually, our formula for, let's talk about manifesting, which is basically, in my opinion, creating a brain change, like changing the neurology first. It starts with that. So you tune into what it is that you want to call in, right? The process of holding your breath for creating intermittent hypoxia, plus intention, right? Plus powerful emotion, which we create through the music and the breath work, leads to brain change according to will. Like, we're activating stem cells and we're accelerating neurogenesis. And then we also use other mediums like the sauna, because sauna has been shown to massively increase growth hormone, to direct neurogenesis how we want, to create new functions of the mind, to improve the functioning of the brain. So you can actually acquire new skills, increase your learning capacity, memory, ability to communicate, and even self-heal. So this is the combination of the techniques we do in our retreats, which can change people's lives in just days.
Yeah, you create so dramatic shifts in their brain and their outlook of their reality. Yeah,
orgasmic states with intention leads to transformation.
Yes.
Sex magic.
Tantra. That's what it is, no? And in terms of your routine, like, what is the routine? Like, I guess you do that daily, but what's the routine you found for yourself that you do regularly for yourself?
Like, I change up a lot, depending on where I am. I travel a lot, so I'm moving around, or quite busy quite often. So, I try and make a high impact routine. So I use I'm always doing the mindful breathing techniques from BreathFit, our BreathFit course, throughout the day. But some quick ones. So the best type of exercise to get efficient exercise is anaerobic exercise, is is exercise in the absence of oxygen. So there we do certain yoga poses where you hold your breath into the pose. We do certain physical exercises, like any kind of body weight exercise you can think of, from push-ups to lunges, holding breath. And also just walking around the room, holding your nose, holding your breath. Actually, that in the morning, I love to do that. It's like first thing I do. It's better than coffee. You wake up all the blood vessels in your brain, and it makes you go to the toilet, right? So it's a great unblocker, right? So it can decongest your nose, it unblocks your bowels, go to the toilet, boom, and then you're ready to get on with some exercise. Because you shouldn't do exercise when you haven't emptied your bowels, usually. You shouldn't do yoga anyway.
Yeah. So basically, when Niraj is waking up, he closes his nose and walks around the room holding his breath.
Yeah. It looks quite silly, but it's very powerful stuff.
How long are you doing this for?
Just for a few minutes.
But you hold it for a few minutes.
What I do is I gamify it. So I count how many steps I can do. So everyone's going to have their own best score, but on a general rule, on average, most people are going to be around 40 steps. As you get better, you're going to, like walking at a normal pace, you're going to get to 50, 60 and beyond. And then, if you can get over 80, it's quite a good result. It's a sign of very good body tissue oxygenation.
And then you repeat it, or you do it just once?
Yeah. So then I try and do one to maximum effort and then repeat a couple of times. That really raises the CO2, dilates everything. You can feel the effects of CO2 and nitric oxide immediately, of the dilation. And then that's what opens the bowels and helps you.
Got it. So you get up, you hold your breath, you go 40 to 80 steps. And then you breathe in once, breathe out again, and you do it again.
Yeah, always through the nose. Yeah.
But only once you breathe in the between. Okay.
Because the goal is to keep the CO2. to raise the CO2.
High, yeah, and O2 low. I got it. Nice. And then you do that. This is like a 5-minute practice or so. It doesn't take that
Couple of
long.
minutes,
and it has a,
not long.
wow. Okay, cool. Nice. Awesome. I think we are already at the end of our session. So you were already sharing some things, but where should people go to? Like beginners, advanced people who just want to learn more?
Yeah. If you're just starting out, go to the somabreath.com. You'll have a link. Follow Flo's link. And sign up for the free masterclass and just start learning what we're about, what Soma Breath is about, and what we're trying to do, our mission. But then there's also lots of free content on YouTube. So immediately you can go to YouTube, tune into our channel, go to like a playlist. The playlists are set logically, where you can learn a lot about the breath. There's a lot of free demos of our techniques on there. And then you can also check out my Instagram. So we have the Soma Breath Instagram. Niraj Naik Official is my Instagram, personal one. And our Facebook group is super buzzing. Like, if you want to get involved with a community of super cool people, all super high vibe, then go and join our Facebook group.
Amazing. We put that as well, all in the show notes. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Niraj. It was great.